All right, Alexander, let's do a quick preview of the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, which is set to kick off on the 29th of November. That is when all this is going to go down. Mail Online had an exclusive interview with Ghislaine, and she talked about her prison conditions. She said, quote, I am weak, frail, tired, and don't even have shoes that fit. Guards feed me rotten food, and one apple had maggots in it. She talked about her cell, her 10-foot cell, how she's not bathing. Her family said they're going to stand by her side, and they actually said they've petitioned the UN as well for help to get her out on bail. That's from NBC News. Ghislaine Maxwell's family appeals to the UN for help to get her out on bail. I believe 6 family members are going to be at the trial supporting her. There's going to be testimony from Virginia Guffrey. And of course, she's going to probably talk about Prince Andrew, though Prince Andrew hasn't been charged with anything yet. And that's the update. Everyone's waiting for the trial. There's a lot of people implicated in and around Ghislaine, from, former presidents to former billionaires and oligarchs. What should we be on the lookout here? What do you think is going to play out as this case gets underway?
Well, the first thing to say is that I think that she's followed a legal strategy which I think is a mistaken one. I have repeatedly said, right from the moment when she was arrested, that her best interests would have been to do a deal with the prosecution. Instead, she's elected to take the entirely different line. She has decided to fight it all the way through. She's now engaging in a publicity campaign to try to win over public opinion to her side. That was what that Daily Mail article was all about. That is what those applications to the United Nations are all about. The United Nations application is an absurdity, if I may say. I mean, just imagine how many other people are are held in custody pending trial, and how many of those make applications to the United Nations. I mean, that's an absurd idea. That's trying to put herself in a position of some sort of political prisoner, like Julian Assange or something. I mean, the only thing that will do is offend the judge and the court and the legal process. I mean, that is an extraordinarily cack-handed and foolish mistake to make. As for the Daily Mail article, what I will say about the interview is that, of course, it was riddled with contradictions, because on the one hand, we see Ghislaine talking about, the harsh prison conditions that she's subjected to, and prison conditions can be harsh, and they are so in every country. And I'm not going to go into the details, but, I'm not disputing that this is a different life from the one that she normally lives or has become accustomed to. But at the same time as she does that, she talks all about how she plays peekaboo with the guards, how she has fun with them, all kinds of things of that kind. And I suspect that's intended to project an image of a rather feisty person. But what it actually does is suggest somebody who isn't taking this thing entirely seriously. So I don't think that was a wise interview. And I certainly don't think this United Nations application is a good idea. What I predict is going to happen is that we're going to have a trial, as you said, starting on the 29th. We're going to have multiple witnesses who are going to be the young women. Well, of course, they're not so young anymore, but the women who were involved with Ghislaine, who Ghislaine brought in. They're going to have testimony after testimony about her and about the role she played. It will be incredibly damaging. There will be attempts by the prosecution to try to challenge or weaken the effect of that testimony upon the jury. I think the defense needs to be incredibly careful, because if they cross-examine these witnesses too hard, what will probably happen is that the jury will feel that they're being bullied, that the defense is trying to bully them. So I think this is a misconceived strategy. I predict it's going to fail, and I predict it's going to end up with Ghislaine getting an even harder sentence than the one that she would have got if she'd done that deal. So it's a mistaken strategy. Perhaps an interesting question is, why has she decided to follow it? Because, as I said, I suspect we're going to have a whole train of witnesses, not just Virginia Giuffre, but all sorts of other witnesses. All of whom are going to make it absolutely clear the central role that Ghislaine had in Epstein's affairs.
Yeah, if convicted, Maxwell faces up to 80 years in prison if she's convicted of all the charges.
Well, in other words, she'll be in prison all her life, because I can't imagine her being let out on bail or anything like that.
Yeah, the trial is expected
I should say.
Okay, the trial is expected to last 6 weeks. She is 59 years old, so yeah, 80 years of prison is essentially, that's it. That's a life sentence. Her family, Alexander, 6 siblings. 6. I didn't know she had such a big family. They said that they don't expect her having a fair trial. They just don't expect it. What do you think? Do you think she's going to get a fair trial?
I don't see why not, actually. I mean, obviously, the problem with the United States, and it does seem a bit strange sometimes to the British, from a British perspective, is that in the United States, it's a country where there are protections, there are free speech protections provided by the First Amendment to the Constitution, and there are lots of opportunities for people to talk and discuss what goes on in a case, and all sorts of things have been said about Ghislaine, which would affect, popular perceptions of her. But against that, as we've seen in the Carl Rittenhouse case, if the evidence is that she is innocent, we've seen that American juries are prepared to disregard all, the sort of back chatter, focus on the evidence in the trial itself, and vote to acquit, despite all of, the commentary and the discussions and the debate happen. That seems to be a feature of American legal culture. So I don't see how Ghislaine can realistically argue, or her siblings can argue, that she's going to get a less fair trial than other people in the United States. I would have thought, on the contrary, she's going to get a fairer trial than most people in the United States who go up before a court do, because she can afford, or is provided with, an expensive legal team which can defend her, which most people, of course, in the United States who find themselves in this kind of situation can't afford to do. So the balance, in a sense, is more in her favour than it is in the vast majority of cases. And as I said, saying that it's not going to be a fair trial, again, all that's going to do is annoy and antagonise the judge, and perhaps the jury as well.
Yeah, one of Maxwell's brothers, Ian Maxwell, gave an interview to BBC, and he said, quote, "I think my sister's probably relieved finally that it is starting, because she's been in prison now for over 500 days in isolation. So this has to come to an end. The trial is starting, so I think there is relief on her part, and I think the family's part." He also said that he believes the trial will be poisoned by all the publicity and everything. The jury will be poisoned, actually, to be more specific, because of all the media attention. One of the big stories, as far as evidence is concerned, is also this little black book that they say U.S. prosecutors claim this book, labeled Government Exhibit 52, contains potentially incriminating information about the names of her alleged victims. It also contains, of course, the names of many people she is associated with. I mean, to me, it could be every name in her contact list, so it's hard to say that this is incriminating to anybody. But that's going to be one of the main pieces of evidence that I'm sure people are going to be talking about if it is, if those names are made public. We'll see. Anything else we should be on the lookout here?
I'm not going to debate what the evidence is. I mean, the prosecution says that they have evidence. Let's wait and see what that evidence is and what it really amounts to. But as I said, I don't know to what extent individuals who were, shall we say, perpetrators, along with Epstein and Ghislaine, are going to be identified over the course of this trial. But I do expect, unless provided and the prosecution is doing its job properly, that we're going to see, as I said, a train of prosecution witnesses, most of them women, who are going to actually put Ghislaine right at the centre of Epstein's activities. I mean, that's what we've been led to expect. Obviously, there will be discrepancies. There always are. Witnesses are often trying to remember events that happened a long time ago. So there may be issues and differences and misconceptions. But juries understand that. They understand that not everybody has a complete photographic memory. And as I said, if you have an accumulation of witnesses like that, I think it'll be very difficult for Ghislaine to persuade a jury that she is completely innocent. What she's trying to do is to play the victim here. And I just think that is a profoundly mistaken strategy, given the realities of the Epstein affair and who the victims in it really were. So I think that's, it's a very difficult strategy to understand. It is such a difficult strategy to understand that when I hear things like, that she's looking forward to the trial, I wonder whether either she's being completely delusional or whether perhaps she knows things about what's going to happen at the trial that at the moment we don't, and whether in fact we're going to see the prosecution pull its punches for some reason, or perhaps we're going to find things take a different turn from what we expect. But on the face of it, I would have thought this was a mistaken strategy, so mistaken that I don't really think I fully understand it.
All right. And another piece of information is that there's actually, in this case, 3 accomplices. At least the prosecutors are saying that Maxwell had 3 accomplices, Epstein and 2 unidentified women who supposedly received big salaries and perks. And these co-conspirators were all involved in the scheme to lure the young girls to Epstein's mansion. This is what one of the lawyers representing one of the victims has said. So they were all involved in a conspiracy. And this evidence of a conspiracy comes in the form of emails between Ghislaine and one of these co-conspirators. And Ghislaine's lawyers are saying this, which you can comment on, Alexander. They're saying that the contents of the emails, in this case, the court should reject the belated, insufficient, improper arguments that the emails are direct evidence of the charge of conspiracy. What do you make of that line?
Well, I would be very surprised if the judge rejected this evidence, actually, because it does seem to me to go directly to the actual charges which have been brought against Ghislaine. I mean, whether these emails prove the conspiracy is exceptionally difficult to prove in a law court, at least without an admission or a confession from one of the co-conspirators. Whether it will prove conspiracy is another matter. But if it goes to proof of Ghislaine's own guilt, then I would have thought the judge will admit it.
Yeah, and obviously one of the co-conspirators can't testify, can't be present. That is Epstein. Epstein actually was, the New York Times got some documents, just real quick, for which Epstein was talking to a psychologist at his prison, and he said that he was too much of a coward to off himself, which is an interesting revelation. And I think he gave this interview like 2 weeks before the event happened, which was an interesting find by the New York Times.
It is very interesting. I'm going to say, coming back though to the Ghislaine trial, and since you brought up the subject of Epstein, one of the fundamental problems that Ghislaine faces in trying to present herself as an innocent person and as a victim is that there's no dispute, there's no doubt at all that Epstein was the unbelievably dangerous sexual predator that we've been hearing about, and that he did all these terrible things that he's alleged to have done. Because remember, he admitted doing it in one case and was actually convicted. So, that makes it all but impossible, I would have thought, for Ghislaine to deny that all of these things were happening. Nonetheless, despite the fact that he was convicted, despite the fact that he was who he was, she remained very intimately involved with him. And that already sets up a scenario which is challenging, given the witness evidence, the evidence of the witnesses, it seems to me, to shake or turn round. Given what the witnesses are saying, I would have thought this is going to be a very, very difficult case to defend. And I have to say, I'm generally surprised that Ghislaine has taken the tactic of defending herself in the way that she has.
Have you heard anything of these two co-conspirators? I know there are two
No.
women that were involved in helping Ghislaine recruit. I forgot their name, but there's been a lot of articles written about them.
Yeah,
One of them was actually like a pilot on Epstein's plane, and the other one was this young girl in New York who would go out and approach young girls and kind of groom them into Epstein's circle. But do you know,
No.
do the prosecutors, do they have hold of them, or?
Well, that we'll have to see in the trial, and we'll have to see whether any one of them has turned in some way. But I mean, that remains to be seen. What I will say is that there is a difference between them in the sense that one of these is a pilot, and that suggests a person of maturity and experience and some degree of self-possession, and that does beg the question of how implicated in what Epstein was doing, and perhaps potentially Ghislaine was doing, this person was. So she looks, the pilot looks like a serious individual.
Yeah, and I think it was a pilot. Just want to clarify.
Exactly. Yeah. The other one, who was a young woman who was acting as a sort of bait and might have been herself heavily manipulated and compromised. And, again, I mean, this is just guessing now. I mean, she might have arguments that she was basically leveraged or manipulated into doing these things. So we mustn't assume that in a conspiracy all the conspirators are equally guilty with each other. And the more vulnerable somebody is, in my experience, in conspiracy cases, the more likely they are to turn. Those who are most deeply implicated, of course, could find it more difficult. So, I don't know much about these two co-conspirators, but the younger one might be prepared to give evidence about the actions of the other two. And of course, if that does happen, then it's a bleak situation for Ghislaine.
Yeah. Well, we'll see as the trial unfolds. All right, the Duran.locals.com, Rumble, ODYSEE, BitChute, Super U is where you will find us as well. And the Duran shop for after Thanksgiving and throughout the whole holidays, Alexander, we will be having 10% off on all the merchandise, on everything, when you use the code word Good Day.
Good day.
And actually, I'm going to create some merchandise around that as well, Alexander.
Indeed.
And that is your catchphrase when you open up your videos.
Indeed.
By the way, go ahead.
In the meantime, since it is the week of Thanksgiving, the Thanksgiving holiday, you will all see that I'm drinking from one of my favourite mugs, which is the mug with the flag of the USA.
Yeah. Well, I've got a Greek mug to celebrate Thanksgiving, to celebrate the time when the Greek pilgrims came to Greece and ate their turkey. Anyway, all right. Take care, everybody.